In this video, I'm going to cover a little bit more about what happens when you get denied buying a gun. There's a couple of different ways that can happen. You can get denied instantly, or your background can delay and then get denied later. On an instant denial, it usually means that there's something on your record. It could be something as innocuous as an unpaid parking ticket that they issued a bench warrant for. Nothing that's going to land you in jail or anything like that, because if you don't know, you don't know. But anything like that, any little charge, you go out of town, something happens, you don't get the notice, it can come back and sneak up on you on a background check. That just kicks in the appeals process. So in those cases, what you have to do is get your transaction number from the dealer and go through the appeals process. You always want to do that no matter what, because once you deny to buy a gun, you will always deny to buy a gun. And you have to clear every single one of those before you're able to apply for a unique personal identification number, or before you can just get it cleared up so you can buy a gun without that happening in the future. So there's a lot of nuances to it, but it's not a big deal as long as you haven't committed a crime that is in those yes and no categories on that form. Pretty much everything else can get cleared up without a whole lot of headache. Now, if you get denied right away and you don't have any of those other things, you still want to go through that appeals process because you don't know. And unless you go through that process, you'll never know, and that's always going to be lingering. Something I just found out recently is if you've been denied to buy a gun and you get pulled over in a traffic stop and that officer runs your information, they get an alert on their computer that you attempted to buy a gun and were denied. And this officer at least told me that alert gets sent to, I can't remember the mile radius, but it gets sent out to all officers within a certain radius, basically to make sure that that officer is going to be okay and nothing goes down. Because if someone went to buy a gun and got denied, that's a red flag for them. So they know that, and they get told that. So you always want to clear it up because that'll always be there. So you might get approached a little differently if you don't clear that up in a regular traffic stop for like speeding or something. Now, if you delay and then it comes back denied, a lot of times I see that more with deferred adjudications that the paperwork didn't get processed out properly. And it's still a process. So in those cases, you still go through the appeals process. No matter what, if you get denied, go through the appeals process. Unless you're a criminal and then you just kind of screwed up, just don't bother. But if you're not a criminal and you feel like you should be legally authorized to buy guns, go through that process. Now, there are some factors that will kick you out and you're just never going to be able to buy a gun. The biggest one is illegal drug use. Now, this is a federal form, so this is a federal question. So if you're in a state that has legalized marijuana and you've ever gotten a marijuana card or medical marijuana card or anything like that, you will never be able to buy a gun because you have officially gone on record that you use marijuana, which is a federally prohibited substance. So it's kind of wacky, but states can't be less restrictive than the feds. And firearms, even though our permits are state permits or issued by state, so like I can only deal in the state of Texas, I'm still federally regulated. So yeah, Texas can say it's okay to make a silencer. That's something that they've done recently. Well, yeah, okay, but I can't because I'm federally regulated and it's still not okay federally to make one without a tax stamp and going through the feds. So those kind of things with illegal drugs are things to think about. So if you do use an illegal substance, if you answer that question on that form that you're not an illegal user because you have a medical marijuana card, technically you've committed two crimes. You're trying to buy a gun while you are an illegal user of marijuana and you lied on the form. So just be cognizant and realize that form is a federal form. So your state legalizing something doesn't make it legal on the federal level, no matter which way you shake it. So the other thing that we'll see is deferred adjudications. So I don't know specific crimes that these people might have done or gone through the process of, but one example would be a DUI that's escalated to a felony. If you have that, there's so much criteria, at least in the state of Texas, where after so many years, if you've done everything you're supposed to do, met with your probation officer, done your jail time, you can then get your gun rights back. This process, white collar crimes is another way. There's a process to do that. There is a way to get gun rights back, but it doesn't happen automatically. So just because you've heard that after 6 years I can buy guns again, well, put on the brakes and do your research, because that doesn't mean that you can just go buy a gun. You probably have to submit some paperwork to get permission back to be able to buy a gun. And in those cases, you still want to go through the appeals process, find out what's up, and then get all your paperwork together and submit it. Because again, that deny is always going to be there, and it's going to be a red flag anytime you have an encounter with law enforcement. So ultimately, if you feel confident that you have a clean background or you should be able to legally purchase a gun, don't get mad at the system. It's there for a reason. I don't necessarily agree with every element of it. However, if you've got someone else out there with your same name that is truly a bad person, wouldn't you rather the government err on the side of caution on a gun getting to that person than let that really bad person get a gun and go cause harm to somebody? So yeah, it's an inconvenience sometimes if you got a common name or if you got someone else with the same name that's a criminal, but there's reasons. I said I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but there are reasons for it, and it's not always a bad thing. So when you get denied, don't panic. Just like with delays, just work the system. And everybody that I know of that has been denied, that has appealed that denial, has been able to get the gun. Just a lot of people don't put in the work. So take the time and put in the work and go through that process and work the process. So that's a bit more information on denials. I will link all of the documents down below on how to go through that appeals process and some more articles about denials and what exactly that means. Some stuff is also very state specific. Another bad thing about the gun purchasing process is if you were in the military and you were dishonorably discharged, you can literally never buy a gun legally. So another dealer friend of mine, he had a guy come in that was in his 80s. When this dude was a teenager, so over 60 years earlier, he got dishonorably discharged from the military. And my buddy had to tell this poor guy that because of that, he could never own a gun again. So there are criteria that it's just kind of one of those, you're in a tough spot, like you just can't ever. And that's when all of our life choices kind of come back to bite us. So be critical, think critically, and work the process, but be aware that if you made some certain mistakes when you were younger, you may never be able to recover from it, depending on what it was when it comes to your gun rights. So thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. If you have any specific questions that I can maybe try to dig into for you, please drop it in the comments. I'd also love to know where you're from. What state are you in? Because the state laws vary so much, and some states can be so much more restrictive than like where I'm at in Texas. Thank you.